It happened on a quiet street where nothing ever seemed to happen, a place where the lawns were trimmed, the mail arrived on time, and neighbors smiled politely from across their driveways. But behind one of those smiles was a secret, one that would unravel everything the people on Maple Drive thought they knew about trust, loyalty, and the people they called friends. For Emily Ward, the house next door had always been just another part of the scenery. She'd lived at number 42 for 7 years with her husband, Tom, a man who worked hard, laughed easily, and loved her in a way that once made her feel safe. Their life wasn't perfect, but it was stable, predictable, until the day the new neighbors moved in. They arrived one late summer afternoon, Claire and Daniel Bennett. She was radiant, with dark hair that caught the sun and a confidence that drew attention without trying. Daniel was quiet, reserved, the kind of man who nodded instead of waved. From the start, Claire had a way of filling the space around her, as if she'd been waiting her whole life to step onto that street. Emily remembered the first time she met her. It was at the mailbox, both women pretending not to stare too long. Claire had smiled, that perfect kind of smile that hides more than it reveals, and said, "Looks like we're neighbors now." It was a small moment, but it lingered, the kind of moment that sticks in the corners of your memory, without you realizing why. Days turned into weeks, and soon the Bennetts were part of every backyard barbecue, every Sunday walk, every casual conversation across fences. Claire seemed genuinely interested in Emily, in her life, her work, her marriage. And Emily, who hadn't had a close friend in years, found herself opening up. She told Claire about her struggles to conceive, her fears about Tom's long hours, her loneliness in a house that once felt alive but now echoed with quiet. Claire listened, always listening, always asking questions that were just a little too personal, but framed with warmth. "You're so strong," she'd say. "I don't know how you manage it all." It sounded like admiration. It wasn't. What Emily didn't see, what she couldn't have seen, were the glances Claire gave Tom when she thought no one was looking. Small, precise, calculated. The kind of glances that start as curiosity and end as obsession. Tom, at first, brushed it off. "She's just being friendly," he told Emily one night when she mentioned how often Claire seemed to be around. "She's new here. Give her time." And Emily did, because that's what you do when you trust people. But trust is fragile. It doesn't shatter all at once. It splinters slowly, one small crack at a time. The first crack came the night Emily saw a light on in Claire's house at 2 a.m. From her bedroom window, she could see into their kitchen. Claire standing there in her robe, staring out the window toward Emily's home. It was unnerving. The next morning, Claire waved as if nothing had happened. The second crack came a week later, when Emily found a wine glass on her patio table that wasn't theirs. She thought Tom might have had a drink outside, but he denied it. "Maybe from the barbecue last week," he said. But she remembered cleaning everything up. And then there was the third crack, the one that changed everything. It was a Sunday afternoon. Emily had gone to the grocery store, but realized halfway there she'd forgotten her wallet. She drove back, annoyed, thinking about dinner, about laundry, about all the mundane things that fill a life. When she pulled into the driveway, she noticed something strange. The curtains in the living room were drawn shut. Tom never did that. She walked inside quietly, her shoes pressing into the carpet. The house smelled faintly of perfume, floral, unfamiliar. Then she heard it, laughter, soft, intimate laughter from upstairs. Her breath caught. At that moment, something primal shifted inside her. She didn't want to believe it. She couldn't. But the truth was already clawing its way to the surface. She climbed the stairs one step at a time, her heart pounding in her throat. The laughter stopped. A door closed. Silence. When she reached the bedroom, everything looked normal. Too normal. But she noticed a mirror, a faint handprint on the glass, the sheets slightly askew. She touched the edge of the bed and felt the warmth still lingering there. She didn't confront them that day. She didn't scream or demand answers. She just stood there in that quiet, immaculate room, realizing that the life she thought she had was already gone. Across the street, Claire watched from her window, her face unreadable. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, Emily sat alone on her porch. The neighborhood looked the same, peaceful, ordinary, but she knew now that nothing was as it seemed. And as the crickets began to sing, she whispered to herself, "Something's not right next door." The next morning, sunlight filtered through the curtains, warm and indifferent. Emily sat at the edge of the bed, staring at the empty space beside her where Tom's pillow still held a faint imprint of his head. He had already left for work, the sound of his car fading hours ago. The silence that followed was almost unbearable. Every creak of the house seemed amplified, every shadow unfamiliar. She told herself she was being paranoid, that the perfume she'd smelled, the laughter she'd heard, were coincidences. Her mind, tired and overworked, was inventing stories to fill the loneliness. But no matter how much she tried to rationalize it, something inside her refused to quiet down. The unease clung to her skin like dust she couldn't wipe away. That afternoon, she stepped outside to water the small garden by the porch. Across the hedge, Claire was there, tending to her roses. She waved, smiling as if the world were perfectly fine. Emily forced herself to wave back. The neighborly ritual felt strange now, hollow. "Beautiful morning," Claire called out. Her voice was light, airy, almost melodic. "It is," Emily replied, her words careful, cautious. For a moment, they both stood there in silence, separated by a thin fence that suddenly felt like a wall. Claire bent down, cutting a rose, then looked up again, her eyes meeting Emily's. There was something sharp in that gaze, something that flickered for only a second before vanishing behind her practiced warmth. Later that week, Emily tried to distract herself. She cleaned the house, reorganized shelves, tried to find normalcy in routine. Yet every object, every photograph seemed to carry weight. The picture of her and Tom from their trip to Maine, his arm around her, both smiling at the camera, looked like a lie now. That evening, Tom came home late. He kissed her on the cheek, brief and distracted, then disappeared into the shower. She watched him from the hallway. The distance between them felt immeasurable, as if they were strangers occupying the same house. When he came out, towel draped over his shoulders, she finally asked, "Everything okay at work?" "Yeah," he said, not looking at her. "Just busy." The words hit her like cold water. Busy. Always busy. That night, she couldn't sleep. The glow of the digital clock painted the ceiling in a dull red hue. At 2 a.m., she got up and went to window. Claire's kitchen light was on again. Emily watched as Claire stood by her sink, staring out into the night. Then, slowly, Claire reached for her phone. A light illuminated her face. She smiled, a soft, knowing smile, and typed something. Seconds later, the faint buzz of a phone echoed in Emily's room. Her heart froze. She turned and saw Tom's phone lighting up on his nightstand. He was asleep beside her, unaware. The message preview flashed for a moment before fading into darkness. She couldn't see the words, only the name. Claire. Emily's stomach turned. She stood there in the stillness, the sound of her heartbeat filling her ears. She wanted to believe it was innocent, that maybe Claire was messaging about something trivial, but that part of her that had once trusted people so easily was shrinking. The next morning, Emily acted as though nothing had happened. She poured Tom his coffee, packed his lunch, smiled when he kissed her goodbye. As soon as the door closed, she exhaled the breath she had been holding in. She went to Claire's house. Her hand trembled slightly as she knocked. After a few seconds, Claire opened the door, surprised but smiling. The scent of her perfume was the same one Emily had noticed days before. "Hey," Claire said cheerfully. "Everything all right?" Emily hesitated. "Yeah, I just thought I'd drop by. We haven't really talked lately." Claire stepped aside. "Come in." The house was immaculate, almost unnaturally so. Everything arranged perfectly, not a single thing out of place. There was something sterile about it, something that made Emily uneasy. She noticed a coffee mug on the counter, half full. It was the same kind Tom used every morning. They sat at the kitchen table. Claire crossed her legs, tilting her head slightly. "You seem tense, Em. Everything okay at home?" Emily forced a smile. "Fine. Just tired, I guess." Claire nodded slowly, her expression sympathetic. Marriage can be hard sometimes. People change, you know? You think you know someone, and then one day you don't. The words landed with quiet precision. Emily studied her, searching for cracks in her perfect composure. But Claire's face was calm, her tone soft. Still, something in her eyes betrayed her, a glint of satisfaction, subtle but unmistakable. When Emily left the house, she felt the weight of the conversation pressing on her chest. She walked home under the fading sun, her mind spinning. The fence between their houses looked smaller now, almost meaningless. The truth was already crossing it. That night, Tom came home earlier than usual. He brought takeout from their favorite restaurant, acting like everything was normal. They ate together in silence. At one point, he reached for her hand across the table. His touch felt colder than she remembered. Later, when he went to bed, Emily stayed downstairs. The quiet hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the room. She looked through the window toward the Bennett's house. The lights were off, except for one upstairs, Claire's bedroom. Emily stood there, motionless, as the curtain shifted slightly and a shadow moved behind it. She didn't know if it was Claire or Daniel, but she couldn't shake the feeling that whoever it was knew she was watching. The following week dragged like a slow storm. Emily moved through the days as if half awake, caught between suspicion and denial. The air in the house felt heavier now. Tom's laughter, once warm and genuine, carried a distance she couldn't ignore. The smell of his cologne lingered longer on his clothes, sharper, unfamiliar somehow. It wasn't just a scent, it was what it meant. It was the scent of someone who wanted to be noticed. Each night, he came home a little later. His excuses changed: meetings, traffic, a co-worker's birthday, all perfectly reasonable, all perfectly hollow. Emily found herself memorizing the sound of his car in the driveway, the way the headlights swept across the living room wall before fading into darkness. She would sit by the window pretending to read, her book unopened, her heartbeat counting down the seconds between his footsteps. One evening, she noticed a small change in his behavior. He began locking his phone. Tom had never cared about privacy before. They shared everything: passwords, bank accounts, even playlists. But now, his phone was always face down, his replies short, his attention elsewhere. Emily didn't confront him. Not yet. She had learned that silence could reveal more than questions ever could. On Thursday, a soft rain fell through the night. The world outside glistened under the streetlights, quiet and still. Emily couldn't sleep. At 1:30 a.m., she went downstairs, the floor cold under her feet. She stood by the kitchen window, the one that looked out over the Bennett's house. Through the blur of rain and glass, she saw a figure outside, a man standing by Claire's back door, umbrella in hand. The porch light flickered for a moment, and she saw his face. Tom, her breath caught in her throat. He knocked once, then twice. The door opened. Claire stood there in a silk robe, her hair loose, her posture casual, as if this were something ordinary. She smiled, stepped aside, and let him in. The door closed. The light went out. Emily stood frozen, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might shatter her ribs. The world outside seemed to vanish, swallowed by the rain and the dark. She hadn't moved for a long time. She just stood there, watching the faint outline of the house next door. The image seared into her mind. When Tom came home the next morning, his clothes were damp. He said his car had broken down, and that a colleague had dropped him off. He smelled faintly of perfume again. Emily didn't respond. She simply nodded, her expression unreadable. Inside, something was breaking quietly, like thin glass under pressure. That afternoon, she sat alone on the porch, staring at the wet street. The rain had stopped, but everything still glistened, as if the world had been washed clean except for her thoughts. Across the hedge, Claire appeared. Her hair was still damp, her face glowing in the post-rain sunlight. She looked radiant, alive in a way that made Emily's stomach twist. Claire waved. "Rough night?" she asked, her tone sympathetic, but edged with something else, amusement maybe. Emily smiled faintly. You could say that. For the rest of the day, Emily barely spoke. When Tom came home, she acted as if nothing had changed. But inside, her mind was a storm. She began to watch them closely. The stolen glances, the excuses, the little patterns that people think no one notices. She became a ghost in her own house, moving silently, collecting fragments of truth. In the following days, she noticed things. A strand of hair that wasn't hers on Tom's jacket. A small scratch on his wrist. A new playlist on his phone titled For You. She didn't need to ask who you was. Friday night, she followed him. Tom told her he was going to meet an old friend at a bar across town. He kissed her goodbye, and she smiled, a perfect, empty smile. 10 minutes after he left, she grabbed her coat, her keys, and her resolve. She drove carefully, headlights off for the last few blocks. She saw his car parked 2 streets over, near the park. The night was cold, the air heavy with fog. She followed the faint glow of streetlights until she saw him. He wasn't alone. Tom stood near the edge of the park, his hand brushing against someone's shoulder. Claire. They talked quietly, faces close, their voices swallowed by the night. Claire laughed softly, tilting her head the way she always did when she wanted attention. Tom touched her arm, and the way she looked at him, the slow, deliberate gaze, said everything words couldn't. Emily turned away before they kissed. She didn't want to see it. Some truths are too heavy to witness twice. When she returned home, she felt hollow. She sat in the dark, the sound of clock ticking in the living room louder than her own thoughts. She didn't cry. She couldn't. The tears felt distant, locked behind the shock. In the morning, she made breakfast. Tom came in, humming, acting as if nothing had happened. She watched him pour his coffee, stir in the sugar, smile like the man she used to know. But now, every movement felt like an act, every word rehearsed. He asked if she wanted to go out that weekend, maybe take a drive to the lake like they used to. The suggestion stung. She smiled faintly, nodded, and said that sounded nice. But inside, she was already planning. Over the next few days, Emily became meticulous. She started keeping notes, times, dates, patterns. She found a quiet satisfaction in observing. The fear began to fade, replaced by something sharper. Curiosity. Control. She noticed how often Tom's eyes drifted toward the Bennett's house. How Claire's curtains were always drawn at the same times his phone went silent. How Daniel Bennett, Claire's husband, seemed more distant each day, walking their dog alone, his gaze fixed on the ground. One afternoon, while Tom was at work, Emily saw Daniel standing by his fence, staring at the ground. His face was pale, his expression empty. She wondered if he knew. She wanted to speak to him, to tell him everything, but something stopped her. Maybe fear, maybe pride. Instead, she went inside and opened her laptop. For hours, she scrolled through old photos, emails, texts, searching for the point where things began to unravel. It was like tracing the outline of a wound. Then she found something unexpected. A picture from 3 years ago, taken at a mutual friend's wedding. In the background, barely visible, was Claire. Her hair was shorter then, but her eyes were unmistakable. She was watching Tom. The realization hit her like a blow. Claire had known Tom before moving to Maple Drive. This wasn't chance. It was something planned. The next evening, Emily followed her again. This time, she parked farther away, hidden behind a row of trees. She watched as Tom entered Claire's house, glancing over his shoulder once before disappearing inside. The porch light turned off. Emily waited for hours. The cold crept into her bones, but she didn't move. When Tom finally came out, it was past midnight. He looked tired, distracted, and for a moment, she almost felt sorry for him. Almost. When he came home, she pretended to be asleep. He slipped into bed quietly, as if nothing had happened. But in the dark, Emily's eyes were open. She wasn't broken anymore. Something inside her had changed. And for the first time, she wasn't afraid of the truth. She was waiting for it. The days after that night moved like a quiet current. Smooth on the surface, dangerous underneath. Emily played her part with precision. She smiled, laughed at Tom's jokes, asked about his day. She kissed him goodnight, touched his arm at breakfast, and said, "I love you the same way she always had." But her words were hollow now, careful and deliberate. Tom didn't notice. Or maybe he didn't want to. Every lie between them was an invisible thread, and Emily had learned to pull them one by one. One evening, while Tom showered, she picked up his phone from the nightstand. The screen was locked, of course, but a faint light blinked at the top. A new message. She waited, heartbeat steady, until he stepped out of the bathroom wrapped in a towel. "Who's texting you this late?" she asked casually, eyes never leaving the screen. He hesitated, then smiled. "Just Daniel. He's asking about the barbecue next weekend." She nodded slowly. Daniel, the man who no longer looked at his wife. The man who walked his dog alone while his neighbor entertained Emily's husband. That night, when Tom fell asleep, she sat in the dark and watched him breathe. She didn't feel anger anymore. What she felt was colder, quieter, something like clarity. The next morning, she saw Claire in the garden again, pruning her roses. The sound of metal snipping through stems cut through the silence. Emily walked over, barefoot, her expression unreadable. "Morning," Claire said, looking up. Her voice was bright, almost too bright. "Beautiful flowers," Emily replied. "You've been taking good care of them." Claire smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "They only bloom if you know what they need." Emily studied her for a moment. The way she tilted her head, the way her eyes lingered a second too long. "I suppose that's true for most things," Emily said softly. "You just have to know what to feed them." For a brief second, something flickered across Claire's face. A twitch, a crack in the mask, and then it was gone. That afternoon, Emily began to dig. Not in the garden, but online. She searched for old records, photos, anything connected to Claire Bennett. What she found was fragments at first, mentions in local articles, social media posts, a business networking site. Then one piece stood out, an old photo tag from a real estate event 5 years ago. Tom was in it. So was Claire. She stared at the screen for a long time, her stomach tightening. It hadn't been coincidence, after all. They'd met long before Claire and Daniel ever moved next door. Emily printed the photo and placed it in a drawer, alongside a growing collection of quiet evidence. Receipts, timestamps, screenshots. It was her own version of the truth, piece by piece. That night, as rain whispered against the windows, she thought about confrontation, about storming into Claire's house, about screaming, breaking things, demanding explanations. But she didn't. She knew that would be too easy for them. They were both liars, and liars deserve the weight of their own silence. 2 days later, a neighborhood dinner was announced, a casual gathering hosted by the Bennetts, just to bring everyone together again. Emily smiled when she saw the invitation. How fitting. Tom seemed nervous when she mentioned it. "Do we have to go?" he asked, scratching the back of his neck. "Of course," she said gently. "It'll be fun." When the evening came, Emily dressed in a simple black dress, understated, elegant. She watched Tom's reflection in the mirror as he tied his tie, avoiding her gaze. She almost admired the effort he put into pretending. The Bennett's house glowed warm under the porch lights, laughter spilling into the cool air. The scent of grilled food mixed with the sweetness of wine and smoke. Neighbors mingled in clusters, their conversations shallow and cheerful. Claire looked radiant, too radiant, in a dark red dress that clung like a secret. She moved easily among the guests, her laughter light and practiced. But when her eyes met Emily's across the room, the air seemed to thicken. Emily held her gaze. Neither of them smiled. Dinner was served, and the small talk flowed. Tom and Claire avoided each other in public view, but Emily noticed everything. The shared glances, the slight turn of the shoulders, the unspoken electricity. Halfway through the evening, Daniel raised a toast. "To good neighbors and better friends," he said, smiling in a way that didn't reach his eyes. Emily clinked glasses with Tom. "To neighbors," she said softly, her tone laced with quiet venom. Later, as the crowd thinned, Emily found herself alone in the kitchen with Claire. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. Claire poured herself a glass of wine and turned. "You've been quiet tonight," she said, her voice low. Emily stepped closer. "I've been watching." Claire's smile faltered. "Watching what?" "The way you look at him," Emily said. "The way he looks at you." Claire exhaled slowly, eyes narrowing just slightly. "You're imagining things." Emily tilted her head. "Am I?" "Funny, because imagination doesn't usually come with perfume on my husband's clothes." For a moment, the room held its breath. Then Claire smiled again, soft, practiced. "If you really believe that, maybe you should ask him. Not me." Emily's voice didn't waver. "Oh, I will, but I already know his answers. I'm just curious about yours." Before Claire could reply, Daniel walked in, his face tight. He looked between them, sensing the tension. "Everything okay here?" Emily smiled sweetly. "Perfect," she said, brushing past Claire. "Dinner was lovely." She and Tom left early that night. The silence in the car was suffocating. Streetlights flashed across their faces as they drove, each flicker revealing more distance between them. When they pulled into the driveway, Tom turned off the engine but didn't move. "You were strange tonight," he said quietly. "Strange? You barely talked. You looked—" He hesitated, angry. Emily turned to him, her expression calm. "I'm not angry, Tom. I'm just paying attention." He looked at her then, really looked, and for the first time in months, he seemed afraid. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She lay awake, thinking about Claire's smirk, Tom's nervous eyes, Daniel's silence. The pieces were aligning, and something told her the affair wasn't the whole story. The next morning, she decided to visit Daniel. He was in his yard, repairing a broken gate. His movements were mechanical, detached. When Emily called his name, he looked up slowly, as if waking from a long, dull dream. "Hi," she said. "Do you have a minute?" He hesitated, then nodded. They stood by the fence, the air thick with unspoken words. "I think we both know what's been happening," she said finally. Daniel's jaw tightened. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Yeah, I know." There was no surprise in his voice, only exhaustion. Emily studied him. "How long?" "Months," he said quietly. "Maybe longer. I found messages. Photos." She said it was nothing, that I was paranoid. Emily felt a strange mixture of relief and pity. "You didn't confront her?" He shook his head. What would be the point? She'd just lie again. They both would. For a moment, they stood in silence, two broken people divided by a thin wooden fence. "Do you ever wonder why she moved here?" Emily asked softly. Daniel frowned. She said she wanted a fresh start. Emily looked toward the Bennett's house, her eyes narrowing. Maybe it wasn't so fresh after all. When she returned home, Tom was in the kitchen making coffee. He greeted her with a kiss on the cheek, casual, almost affectionate. She let him, but inside, her mind was already spinning. Faster, sharper. Claire and Tom had known each other before Maple Drive. She was sure of it, but how far back did it go? What had really brought her here? That evening, Emily took out the old printed photo again. She traced her finger over their faces. Tom, laughing, unaware. Claire, watching him with quiet intent. Something about her expression chilled Emily. It wasn't attraction. It was calculation. And in that moment, Emily understood. Claire hadn't just fallen into an affair. She'd orchestrated it. But why? As night fell, Emily stood by the window, watching the faint glow of light in the Bennett's bedroom. Two shadows moved behind the curtains. She didn't flinch this time. She didn't look away. Because now she wasn't the woman being betrayed. She was the woman preparing to expose everything. The next morning dawned gray and heavy, the kind of sky that made everything look faded, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Emily woke early, long before Tom stirred. She stood at the window, staring at the Bennett house across the street. Its curtains were drawn, its silence deliberate. She had seen too much to mistake quiet for peace. After Tom left for work, Emily sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open and a cold cup of coffee beside her. The printed photo from the real estate event lay next to it, edges worn from being handled too often. She zoomed in on Claire's face again, that same faint smile, polite but knowing. Then she opened a search bar and began typing. Claire Bennett Real Estate, conferences, past addresses. It didn't take long for more pieces to appear. A different town. A different name. 5 years ago. Claire had been known as Clara Benton. There was a record of her in a small city 3 hours north, a real estate agency that closed abruptly, a house sold under suspicious circumstances, and a brief mention in a local gossip forum about a woman who got too close to a married client. Emily's breath caught. She clicked through, reading every comment, every rumor. It wasn't just an affair. It was a pattern. Claire, or Clara, had done this before. By midday, Emily was trembling, not with fear, but with a grim clarity. The truth wasn't just that Claire had seduced her husband. The truth was that she had chosen him. Chosen them. When Tom came home that evening, Emily didn't say a word. She made dinner. She smiled. She pretended everything was fine. She even asked about his day. But as he talked about mundane things, a project at work, traffic, the neighbor's new car, she studied his face. Every blink, every hesitation, every twitch of guilt. And she realized something deeper still. Tom wasn't just a victim of Claire's manipulation. He was complicit. After dinner, she excused herself and went upstairs. In the quiet of their bedroom, she opened a drawer and took out the photo again. This time, she noticed something she hadn't before, a reflection in the glass wall behind them, a faint outline of another person holding a camera. She leaned closer. The reflection was blurry, but she could make out enough. It was Daniel. The next morning, she walked over to the Bennett's house under the pretense of returning a borrowed dish. Daniel answered, his expression wary. "Mind if I come in?" she asked. He hesitated, then stepped aside. The inside of their house smelled faintly of cinnamon and something metallic, paint, maybe, or something darker. Claire was nowhere to be seen. "Is she here?" Emily asked. Daniel shook his head. "Left early. Said she had errands." Emily nodded, looking around. The living room was immaculate, staged like a magazine photo. No sign of life, no clutter, no warmth. "Daniel," she said quietly, "how long have you known her?" He frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean before you moved here." He blinked, confused. "We didn't know anyone here before." "Don't lie," Emily interrupted softly. "I saw the photo. You were at the same event. 5 years ago. The one where she met my husband." Daniel froze. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Emily took a step closer. "Tell me the truth. Did you know what she was doing?" His voice was barely audible. "I didn't, not at first. She told me later. Said she wanted revenge." "Revenge?" Daniel looked at her then, his eyes hollow. "Tom ruined her life. Years ago. He worked for a firm that forced her out. Said she falsified property records, but she claimed he set her up. She lost everything. Her job, her reputation. I think she's been planning this ever since." Emily stared at him, her pulse pounding. "So she moved here just to destroy us?" Daniel nodded. "She said it was justice." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The sound of rain started outside, soft at first, then harder, faster, until it beat against the windows like a warning. Emily turned to leave. Her voice was calm, but her hands trembled. "Thank you, Daniel." As she crossed the street back to her house, her mind raced. Everything made sense now. The perfect timing, the too convenient friendship, the calculated intimacy. Claire had been watching them long, before she ever introduced herself. Inside, Tom was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone. He looked up as she entered. "Hey, where'd you go?" "Just next door," she said. He smiled, oblivious. "You two getting along again?" She sat down across from him, studying his face. "You knew her before, didn't you?" His smile faded. "What?" "Don't," she said quietly. "I've seen the photo." For a moment, he said nothing. Then he sighed, rubbing his temples. "It was a long time ago, Emily, before she was even married. I didn't think it mattered." "Didn't think it mattered?" Her voice was sharp now, trembling with restrained fury. "You let her move in next door. You let her into our lives. Into my life. She said she wanted to start over, he muttered. Emily laughed, cold, bitter. And you believe her? Tom looked up at her, his expression finally cracking. What do you want me to say? That I made a mistake? Fine. I did. But it's over, Emily. It's done. She leaned forward, her eyes blazing. No, it's not over, because she's not finished. That night, she couldn't stop thinking about Daniel's words. Revenge. Justice. It wasn't just a love affair, it was a vendetta. Claire had orchestrated everything with surgical precision. The move, the friendship, the manipulation. And Emily realized that if she wanted to protect what was left of her life, she'd have to play the same game, colder, smarter, and without mercy. Over the next few days, she began to plan. Quietly, patiently, she started by changing small things. New passwords, hidden cameras in the house. She even synced Tom's phone to her computer, just in case. Then, one evening, she followed Claire. It was nearly dusk, and the sky was painted in bruised shades of purple and gold. Claire left the house in her car, alone, driving toward the edge of town. Emily kept her distance, headlights off, her heart steady. Claire parked behind an old storage building and went inside. Emily waited 10 minutes, then followed. The building was dim, filled with dust and old furniture. She moved quietly, each step echoing faintly on the concrete floor. Then she saw it. A small office at the back, door half open. Inside, Claire stood by a table covered in papers, photos, and a corkboard filled with notes. Strings connected pictures of Tom, Emily, and even Daniel. At the center of it all was a photo of Claire herself, younger, confident, standing beside a sign that read Benton Realty Group. On the corkboard, written in black marker, were 3 words. They took everything. Emily's breath hitched. This wasn't just obsession. It was retribution. She backed away silently, but as she turned to leave, a floorboard creaked beneath her foot. Claire's head snapped up. Emily? The name echoed in the dark like a curse. Emily froze. For a moment, neither woman moved. Then Claire smiled, slow, knowing. So, she said softly, stepping forward, you finally found me. For a long moment, there was nothing but the sound of rain outside, tapping steadily against a rusted metal roof. Emily stood frozen in the doorway, her breath shallow, eyes darting across the dimly lit room. The photos, the notes, the web of strings stretching across the corkboard. And at the center of it all stood Claire, half shadowed by the flickering light of an old desk lamp. She didn't look angry. She looked calm, eerily calm, like someone who had already rehearsed this moment. Emily's voice broke the silence. What is this? Claire tilted her head slightly, eyes gleaming. You tell me. You're the one who followed me here. Emily took a cautious step inside. You've been planning this for years. A faint smile curved on Claire's lips. Planning? No. Preparing. There's a difference. Emily's gaze flicked to the corkboard again. Photos of her and Tom on their porch, candid shots from neighborhood events, even one from their bedroom window. Her stomach turned. You were watching us. I was watching him, Claire corrected softly. You were just part of the picture. Emily's heart pounded. He ruined your career. That's what this is about, isn't it? Claire's expression hardened. He didn't just ruin my career. He destroyed my name. He called me a thief, said I falsified documents, forged signatures. Do you have any idea what that did to me? To my life? You forged them. Emily shot back, her voice trembling with disbelief. I read the reports. Claire let out a dry laugh. Reports written by him. Tell me, Emily, who do you think the company believed? The senior agent with years of influence or the woman he once slept with? The words hit like a slap. Emily blinked. He slept with you? Claire's smile deepened, sharp as glass. Before you two were married, we were together. He said he loved me, said he'd leave his girlfriend for me. But when things got complicated, he turned me into the problem. I lost everything. And then I saw your engagement photo in the paper. The same man who destroyed me smiling like a saint, holding the woman who replaced me. Emily's throat felt dry. So you moved next door? Just to get revenge? Claire stepped closer, her heels echoing against the floor. Not just revenge, justice. I wanted him to feel what it's like to lose something precious, to be betrayed by the person he trusted most. Emily shook her head, her pulse racing. So you slept with him again? You think that makes you righteous? Claire's tone was almost tender. No, Emily, that wasn't the plan. She paused and smiled faintly. You were? The room seemed to tilt for a moment. Me? Claire gestured toward the wall, toward a small cluster of photos pinned beside the corkboard. All of Emily, at the grocery store, reading in the garden, laughing with Tom. You were perfect, Claire whispered. Perfect wife, perfect life. I want him to fall in love with me again, but I realized something better. I could make you doubt everything, make him suffer through you. Because guilt lasts longer than anger. Emily stared at her, the weight of every word sinking deeper. You're insane. Maybe, Claire said softly, but I'm free. You, on the other hand, you're trapped in a house with a man who's still lying to you, still pretending. Emily's voice broke. You don't know what you're talking about. Claire stepped closer until they were only a few feet apart. Don't I? He told me things, Emily, about your marriage, about how lonely you felt, how predictable you become, how he missed excitement. Do you know what it's like to listen to someone you once loved describe another woman that way? Emily's hands shook. Stop. Claire didn't. I thought it would be satisfying, hearing him confess. But it wasn't, because the truth is, he doesn't deserve either of us. Something in Claire's expression softened then, like a crack in stone. He used me, Emily, just like he's using you now. We're both just stories he tells himself to feel important. Emily's chest ached, but her voice came out steady. If you really believe that, you wouldn't have followed him here. You wouldn't still be obsessed. Claire's smile faltered. For a second, something human flickered behind her eyes. Shame, maybe, or regret. Then the light above them flickered, and the moment passed. You should go, Claire said quietly, before this becomes something you can't undo. Emily didn't move. She looked at the board one last time, then back at Claire. You think you've taken everything from me, she said, but you haven't, because now I know who you are. Claire's eyes darkened. And what will you do with that, Emily? Expose me? Tell everyone? You'll look desperate, unstable. He'll deny it all. He always does. Emily turned toward the door. Maybe, but I don't need anyone to believe me. I just need him to see what I've seen. She walked out into the rain, each step heavy but certain. Behind her, Claire's voice called out, low, almost pleading. Be careful, Emily. When you start digging into someone else's secrets, sometimes you bury yourself. The door slammed shut. That night, Emily sat at the kitchen table, drenched and shaking. The clock ticked softly beside her. Tom walked in a few minutes later, surprised. Where were you? He asked. She looked up at him, eyes hollow, at the storage building near the highway. He froze. What? I saw everything, Tom. Her photos, her notes, the lies. His face drained of color. Emily. How long? She demanded. How long have you known she was there? He didn't answer. Her voice trembled, but she didn't look away. You said she was nothing, just a mistake. But you lied. Again. Tom's expression cracked. Fear, guilt, anger, all tangled together. I tried to protect you. Protect me, she whispered. From what? The truth. He stepped closer. You don't understand. She's dangerous. She's been following me for years. I didn't tell you because I thought she'd stop if I ignored her. Emily laughed bitterly. Ignored her? You slept with her. He flinched. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Emily stood, her voice low and deliberate. I saw the board, Tom. The files. She said you ruined her life. Did you? Tom's silence was answer enough. Finally, he said, I made a mistake at work. She was the one who caught it. If she had reported it, I would have lost everything. So I discredited her first. I didn't think she'd come back. Emily's breath caught. You destroyed her to save yourself. Tom's voice broke. I was desperate. She looked at him then, really looked. The man she thought she knew, the man she'd built her life around. For the first time, she saw the cracks that had always been there. You deserve each other, she said quietly. That night, she packed a small bag. Tom didn't try to stop her. Maybe he knew it was pointless. Maybe he was relieved. But as she walked out into the storm, she saw Claire standing under the porch light across the street, watching. Her face was unreadable, a mix of triumph and sorrow. Emily didn't look away. For the first time in months, she wasn't afraid. The next morning, Emily checked into a motel on the edge of town. The air smelled of bleach and dust, the walls thin enough to hear distant voices. She sat on the bed, staring at her phone. There were missed calls from Tom, none from Claire. She opened her laptop and began typing. Not a message, not an email, a story. The affair next door. Every detail, every lie, every truth she had uncovered. If the world wouldn't believe her, she'd make them listen. And as her fingers moved over keys, something inside her shifted. She wasn't writing as a victim anymore. She was writing as the witness. To the things people do when they think no one is watching. To the way love turns to poison. To the neighbor who smiled too sweetly. And the husband who let her in. Outside, the rain finally stopped. And Emily kept writing. Morning crept in through the blinds, painting thin stripes of light across the motel room. Emily hadn't slept. Her laptop sat open on the desk, its faint blue glow washing over a tired face. The story was there, every memory, every betrayal, printed in her words. But telling the truth didn't feel like enough. Not yet. She closed the laptop and stared out the window. Across the parking lot, a group of strangers went about their morning routines, sipping coffee, loading cars, moving on with their lives. She envied them. The knock on her door came just before noon. 3 sharp taps. Emily froze. Then, cautiously, she opened it. Tom stood there. He looked different, hollowed out, unshaven, eyes rimmed with sleepless red. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair damp from the drizzle outside. He held something in his hand, a folder, edges warped by rain. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. Emily didn't answer, but she stepped aside. Tom entered, setting the folder on the table. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence between them was thick, not angry, just empty. Finally, Tom said, "She's gone." Emily's chest tightened. "What do you mean, gone?" "She disappeared last night. Packed up her car, left the house empty. The landlord said she didn't leave a forwarding address." Emily's hands curled into fists. "You think she's finished?" Tom shook his head slowly. "I don't know, but she left this on my doorstep." He opened the folder. Inside were photographs, the same ones Emily had seen pinned to the corkboard. But this time there was something new, a handwritten note. In Claire's delicate script, it read, "You were right about one thing, Tom. Guilt lasts longer than anger. I hope you enjoy yours." Emily read the line twice before looking up. "You should take this to the police." Tom's voice cracked. "They won't find her. They never do." Emily studied him. The arrogance that wants to find him was gone. What was left looked like a man stripped bare, standing in the ruins of his own lies. "I'm sorry," he said finally, "for everything." The words hung in the air, fragile as dust. Emily didn't respond. There was nothing left to say that could undo what had been done. He reached for her hand, hesitated, then let it fall. "You don't have to forgive me. I just needed you to know." Emily looked at him. This stranger she once called her husband, and felt a strange, unexpected pity. "Go home, Tom," she said softly. "Whatever that means now." He nodded, eyes glistening, then turned and walked out. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving her alone again with the silence. That night, Emily drove back to the neighborhood. The houses stood still and quiet, each window reflecting the soft glow of streetlights. Claire's old house was dark, the curtains drawn, the mailbox empty. But Emily couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still watching. She parked across the street and sat for a while, engine off, the cold seeping into the windshield. The place that had once been home now looked like a crime scene, every memory tainted. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number. For a moment, she considered ignoring it. But something, curiosity, fear, or maybe closure, made her answer. Hello. A pause. Then a familiar voice, low and calm. You shouldn't have gone back there. Emily's pulse spiked. Claire, I told you to stop digging. You lied to me. You manipulated me. Claire sighed softly on the other end. And he didn't? Emily gripped the phone tighter. Where are you? I'm giving you what you wanted, Claire said. The truth. What truth? That he was never just protecting himself. He was protecting someone else. Someone higher up. The fraud, the forged files. It wasn't only his doing. He took the fall to keep the company clean. And when I got too close, they made sure my name was the one buried. Emily's breath caught. Why are you telling me this now? Because you're the only one who might care enough to expose it. Why me? A faint smile touched Claire's voice. Because you still believe the truth matters. The line went quiet for a long second. Then Emily said, if you really want to make things right, turn yourself in. Claire laughed, not cruelly, but with something that sounded like sadness. You still don't get it. This was never about justice. It was about balance. And now it's even. Even? Emily echoed. I took his piece, Claire whispered. You took mine. Now we both get to live with the aftermath. The call ended. Emily sat there, trembling, the phone cold against her ear. Outside, the rain had started again, soft, endless. She looked toward the darkened house one last time, then started the engine. The headlights cut through the mist as she pulled away, the past finally fading behind her. Weeks passed. Emily moved to a small apartment near the coast, a quiet place where the sea met the cliffs and no one asked questions. She spent her mornings walking along the shore, the salt air cleansing something inside her. At night, she wrote. Her story, the affair next door, began as a confession, then became something else entirely. A mirror, held up to people who hide behind polite smiles and manicured lawns. It wasn't just about Tom or Claire anymore. It was about the way secrets infect everything they touch. The manuscript grew longer. Editors called. Publishers showed interest. The first offer came from a small imprint that specialized in true crime memoirs. They wanted to serialize her story online. Emily hesitated. Sharing it would mean giving the world access to her pain, her mistakes, her marriage. But hiding it meant letting them, both of them, keep the final word. So she signed. The series launched quietly, but it spread fast. People were captivated by the quiet horror of suburbia, by the lies whispered between neighbors. Readers speculated, dissected, searched for clues about the real people behind the story. And somewhere, Emily knew, Claire was reading too. Months later, Emily received a package with no return address. Inside was a single item, a photograph. It showed a coastal road, sunlit and empty. On the back, in Claire's handwriting, were 3 words. You were right. Emily stared at it for a long time. Then she placed it inside her notebook, not as evidence, but as closure. She didn't need to know where Claire was, or what had become of her. Some ghosts are meant to linger only as reminders. The sea outside roared louder that night, as if trying to wash away the echoes of everything that had happened. Emily stepped onto her balcony and let the wind whip through her hair. For the first time in what felt like years, she smiled, not out of joy, but relief, because she finally understood the truth doesn't free you. It simply gives you something honest to live with, and that she could bear. Somewhere far away, maybe another city, maybe another country, Claire stood on a dock at sunset, watching ships fade into the horizon. She carried no luggage, only a small leather journal tucked under her arm. She opened it to the last page and wrote one line. Maybe forgiveness isn't about them. Maybe it's about finally forgiving yourself for believing them. She tore out the page, folded it, and let it drift into the water. The tide took it without resistance. Back in her apartment, Emily closed her laptop for the last time. The story was done. Not perfect, not neat, but real. Outside, the sea kept moving, endless, untamed. carrying with it everything that had been lost, everything that would never be said again. And somewhere within that sound, there was peace.